Hello, I welcome to all my dear students. Today we are going to learn Chapter 3 Data Collection, Measurement and Scaling Process of Data and topic Sources of Data Collection. So let's start with the new topic Sources of Data Collection. Introduction of Data Collection. Data in social sciences, as in other sciences, is based on our observations. The word observation as used here includes all forms of sense perception used in recording responses as they imping upon our senses. A response is a manifest kind of action, whereas it's the product of process of recording the response. Sources of data collection. The two main sources of data collection in social science research come from the inner world of library and outside world of the living people. We may consider historical records, diaries, biographies, and statistical record. We turn to consider people as sources of social science data. Various forms of observation, but more particularly and primarily the interview and questionnaire of the techniques for the collection of data sources. The two sources of data collection, primary and secondary. The first is primary data and the definition of primary data. The data a researcher collects to address the specific problem at hand, the research questions. Primary sources mean original works, research or data without interpretation that represent official opinion or position. Primary sources include the letters, complete interviews or speeches, regulations, court decisions, and government data, including census, economic, and labor data, as the most authoritative of all sources. Primary data methods of data collection. The first method, observation method. Observation means acquiring knowledge through the use of sense organs. Observation is the primary tool of scientific inquiry. Observation is not merely seeing things or activities or situation. It is closely and systematically the occurrence is a given situation. Observation is the basic method of obtaining information about the world around us. Observation may take place real life setting in a laboratory. In this slide, now we will discuss various types of observation. The first is casual and scientific observation. Observation may be either casual or scientific. Observation occurs without any previous preparation. Therefore, a matter of chance that the right thing is observed at the right time in the right place. Thereafter, next point is simple and systematic observation. It is found In almost all research studies, at least exploratory stage, such data collection, known as simple observation. Participant studies are also usually classed as simple observation and do not permit systematic observation. The next is subjective and objective observation. In act of observation, the object and the subject, it may be the sometimes one may have to observe on immediate experience. That is called subjective observation or self-observation. On the other hand, many investigations observer is an apart from the thing observed. Next point is intra-subjective and intersubjective observation. It is repeated observation of a constant phenomenon by the same observer, constant data. The observation is said to intrasubjective to the same question, the same way, in the same experimental situation. The next is factual and logical observation. This observation may be at a logical level. For example, in the study of a salesman's presentation, one might specify the various interests. The example is the factual is product presentation and logical is customer acceptance of selling points per product. Next types of observation is direct and indirect observation. This method describes the situation in which the observer is physically present and personally monitors to take place. Next is behavioral and non-behavioral observations. This observation includes the full range of monitoring both the activities and conditions. The analysis, extra analysis, spatial analysis are the four major categories. The observation study of the persons. Next is verbal and non-verbal behavioral observation. This includes observation of body movement, motor expression, and even exchange of glances. Verbal includes oral and written matter, which needs to be observed. Next types of observation is participant and non-participant observation. This observation can also be classified into participant observation and non-participant observation. When observer participates in the activities of the group under the study is known as participant observation. Second is interview method. An interview is a technique used to schedule. Through the interview can types of data be gathered intensively. The interview is means for assessing the personality of the respondent. The various classifications of personal interview. The first is door-to-door interview. The interviewer goes to the residence of the selected respondent and obtain the responses for the items in the questionnaire by directly interviewing for topic of study. Second method is executive interview. It's the same as door-to-door interview except that the interviewers are business executives. This is costly and time-consuming process. The average waiting time of the interviewers at the offices of the executive. Next is mall intercept interview. This is conducted in shopping complexes where a spectrum of customers can be interviewed. People who pass through that place are used to respondent for filing the questionnaires. In this method, the interviewers in a particular place or area, the people who come to that area are sampled with the questionnaires. Next point is self-administered interview. This method has advantages of removing the interviewer's bias. The absence of interviewer could make some of the respondent to some open-ended questions to the limited knowledge or limited doubt. And the last interview method is the purchase indirect method. This method is a direct interview method which the customers and interviewed after the select their items from the showrooms. And these were the various interview method. Third method is questionnaire method. Merits of the questionnaire techniques. The first is economical method. The questionnaire approach makes it possible to cover at the same time number of people spread over large territory and more economical in terms of money or time and energy. Thereafter, next point is time saving. The person are approached through the questionnaire technique, whereas they are to be interviewed. It may take a very long time. Third point is suitable in special type of response. The information about certain problem can be based through the questionnaire method. Next is ensures anonymity or having no name. It is a meaningful characteristic of questionnaire method. The respondents are not required to indicate their names on the questionnaire, and they feel to express their views and opinion. Next method is less pressure on the respondent. The method plays on the subject for immediate response and give the more time to the respondent for properly answering the questions. And last merits, this method is uniformity. A large sample may be drawn, all groups of people can be easily be covered. A uniformity from one measurement situation to another is provided of standardized questions and sequence of questions instruction for recording the responses. Next is demerits or limitations of questionnaire techniques. The first is illiterate and less educated. Questionnaire can be administered only the subject with a considerable amount of education. Second is proportions of return is usually low. In a questionnaire, the proportion of return is usually low. It may sometimes be as low as 10%. And last limitations of questionnaire techniques is misinterprets reply. This method, if the respondent a question or write his reply, there is a very little that to correct this approach. There is no facility for the repeating questions, explaining them, or clarification of a particular responses. So, these were the various demerits or limitations of questionnaire techniques. The second method is secondary data, internal and external sources of data collection. The first is internal sources of secondary data collection. The sources of information within the organization. Internal sources are without which researcher cannot obtain the desired results. The accounting information, for example, trading and profit and loss account, balance sheet, etc. Statistics related to human asset, advertisement expenditure, transportation costs, etc. Next is external sources of secondary data collection. In order to study business problem and details the need of external sources of secondary data. The collection areas, these sources are importance and utility. In case the research needs detailed through the investigation. The various sources of secondary data. For example, technical and trade journals, books, magazines, newspapers, booklets, prospects, annual reports, census survey reports, data content in thesis of PhD students, statistical abstract, statistical books, and information, etc. The next is characteristics of secondary data. Secondary data collection involves less cost, time, and efforts. Sometimes more accurate data can be obtained from secondary data. This data may have been collected with some other purpose in mind at times. It may not be the accurate for many applications. So, the first point is reliability of data. The secondary data available on a particular subject matter must be reliable. The reliability of secondary data determined by the answer the various questions. For example, who collected the data? What were the sources of data? What level of accuracy was expected? Was there any bias on the part of the compiler? Second is suitability of data. This data is available on a particular subject must be suitable for the subject. The data suitable one subject may not be suitable for another. And last characteristics is adequacy of data. This data available should be adequate in terms of accuracy. If the accuracy level of the available data is lower than what is required, the secondary data is considered. Therefore, it can be very risky to use this readily available data. So, these were the various characteristics of secondary data. Thank you.